Our next presenter is Robert Moons, and he's going to present on carbon neutral housing. Robert is an independent consultant. However, during his career, he has worked in different capacities. He has done technical consultations, socio-economic policy, regulatory implications, island sustainable development transition. So without further ado, Robert.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for having me, as I'm from Aruba, and extremely happy and grateful to have been invited to this event, which I very much appreciate, and I commend all of the previous speakers. Carbon neutral housing. For me, climate. This whole debate about climate change started in the year 1991 when I was a student at the university, and I bought this book. It's a book called Changes in the Atmosphere by John Ferrar. By now, the book is 30 years old. I still have it. And I recently discovered that actually it's a famous book. It was a scientist at NASA who published this book. And the book is full of warnings. It's stating that the ozone layer will degrade. It's stating that global temperatures will be rising. And it's stating that the world should cut greenhouse gas emissions. 30 years ago. And then this week, even today, in Egypt, we're still discussing these problems. COP27, the best scientists, the best policymakers, the world leaders are together to discuss how to avoid a global crisis. Actually, it's already there. And if in 30 years this problem has not been solved, the question for us here today is what will happen in the next 30 years, because roughly in 30 years we're going to be at 2050. And 2050 is the target year of the Paris Agreement, and it's stating that the world has to be net zero by 10 with some intermediate deadlines at 2030. Are we going to achieve this goal? Or in other words, can we do this? I must say, the Prime Minister of Barbados, esteemed Mrs. Motley, spoke about this question in her address earlier this week. You know, when she spoke about our collaborative capacity to transform. And my personal belief on this topic is that we can do it, but it can only be done if everyone contributes. So it's not just the governments, it's not only the energy sector, it's not only the oil industry, it's all of us, citizens, businesses, we all have to contribute, and then together we could achieve it, together for implementation, as they say in Egypt. And that brings me to the main question of my talk, which is, how can we live more sustainable and affordable in the Caribbean? Because let's not forget the affordability aspect in all of this. And the organization of this event asked me to share my own experiences. But before doing so, I have to make some disclaimers. I don't have to over-promise, because the organization of the event asked me to talk about a specific project. Actually, it's my own house. So the first disclaimer, it's not scientific. I'm not scientific. To do this scientifically, you don't have to look at one house. You must look at 10 houses, 20 houses, maybe 15 houses, do aggregated data, come with scientific conclusions and so on. I'm only talking about one example, all right? Also, I'm not here to sell any product or service. I'm not selling, I'm just sharing experiences. Just for the technical audience, normally when I talk about this, I do it for general public. Now I added a little more technical information because I was so impressed over the past 2 days with all of the brilliant speakers here. I thought I can add a little more technical information. Just know that I'm not referencing any third parties, anyone. I'm only presenting my own work. I'm only presenting my own data. So you will not see anything from other authors or other people being mentioned. And I'm only talking about carbon operation. I'm not talking about embodied carbon. I learned a lot about embodied carbon at this event. That's going to be my next step to work on. So if you accept all of these disclaimers, and I hope you do, then we will start without further ado. So here we go. And let's start with comfort. Why do we start with comfort? Comfort is in human nature. Okay, so we can talk about sustainability, resilience, all of these things, but let's see what people like. And what is the basic point underpinning the energy problem? The basic point, also as mentioned by someone else yesterday, is that during the day, in the houses, most of the houses that we have in the Caribbean, we close these houses, we close the windows, we close the door, we go away to schools and to work. And then the sun is shining and it's radiating heat. And that heat is transformed through walls, through cement, to the interior of the building, and it's trapped there. So during the day, the space inside gets very warm. And when you get home at 5 or 6 and you open the door, it's very hot and you run to open the windows, or you turn on the air conditioning, but that's really the start of the energy problem. So when I designed my house, I had a lot of discussions with the architect on ventilation, because the first step is to create a stream of air flowing to the house the whole day that is keeping the house cool. So you see on the wind, and the house was also positioned in the direction of the wind. So on the east side there's an air intake, there's special louvers taking air in, and then it's flowing through the living room and the dining room, and there's a air escape at that end. In order to make the living and dining room a pleasant space to be. And I'll get back on it. Okay. Here you see some of the air intake louvers on the wind side of the house, and they can be closed, and they have insect screens, some more details. But I'm sure in the Eastern Caribbean you're better than me at this because you work a lot with louvers. And then in the hall, oh, they see it turning. It has a sunscreen and an opening. Then on the top of the roof, there's an air escape that is sucking the hot air out. So there's a roof window designed on top. And you can close them if needed, of course. So that's the ventilation concept. Oh, and then at some other places in the house, there are also these louvers that are permanently open. I only have for hurricanes, I have special sheets to close them. The other building measure in order to prevent heat from accumulating in the house is to have a white roof that is reflecting. So reflection. You can paint the roof white, or you can use more specific materials, like this is TPO. It's a reflective coating of 2 millimeters, and it's very effective at keeping the heat out. So have the roofs white. But we're going on. Insulation. So here we have a brick, normal brick, and then we're putting a sheet of foam of about 5 centimeters against the brick, and then we're plastering that, so you don't see the foam anymore, but the foam is then embedded in the wall, and in this case, it's on the outside. It's also possible to do it on the inside. You can have a whole debate, inside or outside, but I've done only outside, and it has more benefits. I'll show it later on. So this is basically keeping the heat out, and just a small snapshot of the calculations that the designer and I did. So we modeled the wall in terms of the foam that is on it, and there's a temperature profile, and it has a certain insulation value, the U value, for those who are familiar with it. Okay. But we're not stopping, we're going on. The next step is to have then also insulation in the roof, because like I said, a lot of energy is penetrating to the roof. So we put a sheet of foam also underneath the TPO, and that all goes on the plywood. Actually, the plywood goes in between here in order to have heat also being blocked from the top. So you see by now, the brick is totally encapsulated. It's encapsulated from the side, from the top, from all sides, to prevent heat from entering. And that's how we keep the building cool. Actually, the insulation is only on the west side and the south side, where the sun is the highest. For cost savings, I didn't do it all around, but it's very effective. Okay. Oh, and here you see the insulation profile of the roof. Actually, you should turn your head like this, because that's the top and the foam layer and the plywood, and then there's also another layer underneath the plywood of extra insulation, because I demanded a very high U value, very low, very high R value for the roof in the energy discussions. Okay. Double glazing. So all of the windows that are from glass have double glass, which is more effective at keeping heat out. All right, so after having done all of this, and these are all building energy efficiency measures, we're going to look at the energy side of it, right? Because we're doing this to save energy, right? That's the whole purpose. And also to create a more comfortable indoor climate. Let's not forget that. And a more healthy indoor climate. So let's look first at the air-conditioned rooms, and then we look at the total house. The air-conditioned rooms are very important because they are the main driver of the energy consumption of the house. So let's see. All right. This is from my home energy management system. You see the master bedroom. And what is happening? We have an inverter airco. What is happening? When we turn on the air conditioning at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the evening, it goes to 400 watts. But as it cools the room, very soon the energy that it uses starts dropping, because it's an inverter airco and it doesn't need to use, it has a variable power consumption. So the inverter is switching back, it's switching back. And then by the end of the night, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, it's hardly using energy. It's only 150 watts. And this is, if I may say, it's a big bedroom of like 40 square meters. And the airco is only 12,000 BTU. So this, for me, is really amazing. And if it was not an inverter, or sorry, if it didn't have the insulation and the energy, the cold would dissipate, it's assumed that the power would be the same throughout the night. So it would be a flat profile. So this whole block here is the energy saved. And here you see really the gain that you're getting off of this, right? So we're saving here roughly 25% of energy every night. Now, in my former capacity, I did some extra work, and a former colleague of mine and I modeled this room. So here you see a simulation of the same room, and I'm asking you to look at the bottom side of it, because this is the energy profile, and the straight line, no, the top line with dots is the line, is the room without insulation, and the one with insulation is the one below it with the blue straight line. And you see that due to the insulation, far less energy is used. And the same holds for the rest of the morning, in the early morning hours. And that shows a savings of about 30% per night. So it's quite a good correlation with the practical measurement. And just for those interested, I don't want to drag on too long, but here you see what happens with the temperature. The black is the outdoor temperature and the blues are the indoors. So if there's no insulation in the day, it becomes more hot inside than outside. The indoor temperature goes higher than the outside temperature. But due to the insulation, it keeps the cool and keeps the heat out. And inside, it's cooler than outside. So that's, again, the comfort even during daytime, without the airco being on, still having the effect of the coolness being in the walls captured, because the cement absorbs the cool. And I must say, when you come home at 5 o'clock, the room is still very cool, still 27 degrees from the previous night. So for me, it's really amazing. All right. Then to move on, oh, sorry. I also looked at another house that has nothing of this and has old airco systems, right? That's a bit shocking. And this is not scientific, because it's just a few measurements. But I found an airco that's using 1700 watts continuously the whole night. So then they are up here, and I'm down here about my 25%, but they are up here. So you can see how dramatically it is when you go to the old technology. In this case, we're only using 3 kilowatt hours per night. In this case, you would be using 12 kilowatt hours per night. And this is kind of an easy cost savings graph, because if you use 3 kilowatt hours per night and it's $32 energy rate in Barbados, it's like $1 per night, US dollars, right? And then you're here. But if you're up here, then you're having the fourfold. So you can think of savings, well, depending on the situation of the reference building that you use, but the savings can range between $350 and $1,000 per year. And that helps, of course, to recover the investments in the insulation materials and the labor to apply them. All right, we're still good on time, because the next debate in the family came when, during the hurricane season, it's very hot, no wind, and the spouse and the children, they said the living room is still too hot. And we want to have air conditioning in the living room. Then I thought, oh no, they're going to wreck my energy case, because I'm trying to go to energy efficiency, lower consumption, those things. And now they want more consumption, and it's a whole space to cool. So I told them, what shall we do? Actually, the architect told me the best is to put ceiling fans, because that will create the ventilation and has very low energy consumption. But the children and so on, no, we want the air conditioning. Okay. So I thought, I'm gonna calculate it first. So we simulated the house in the energy tool, and then came a debate, because there are people who are saying it may be cheaper to, if you have the air conditioning, leave it on 24 hours. Because it doesn't have to deal with the inertia of the day and to recool the walls and so on. So that's a famous energy problem in air conditioning. And in the simulation was very interesting, because we're looking here at the energy consumption part. This is the 24-hour profile. This is only the daytime profile, when it has to cool the house, and then it slowly drops. And this is only nighttime. So I'm here expressing units of energy, because very complex energy unit. I'm not going to bother you with that. But it's just the integral, the surface below the blue line. That's what we're counting. And it turned out in the simulation that the 24 hours was still using most of the energy. I found it very interesting. And that turning the airco on in daytime only was still having less consumption. So then I said, okay, if we're only going to do it in daytime, then we will install the airco. And the room has 2 airco positions, but I said we're going to start only one airco. We're going to put 24,000 BTU and see how it goes. All right. Now what you see that the 24-hour profile, this is an experiment leaving the airco on for 24 hours, has the highest consumption. It has a low consumption in the night, but as soon as it's morning, with the sun coming up and with people opening doors, closing doors, air escaping, the airco has to start working hard again to keep the room at a set temperature. And that's especially midday when it peaks, because then it's the hottest and it's the most people coming in and out from school, from work, and so on. The other profiles are a bit strange. Oh, sorry. Because it's starting only at 1 o'clock, because then the school is out. So we're not turning it on at 7, but at 1 o'clock, because then the school is out. And you see that this one is using 50, this one kilowatt hours, this one is using 11 kilowatt hours. So the consumption in the day only is still most favorable, especially if we turn it out earlier. In this case, it stayed on till midnight, not really needed. So that convinced me that, okay, it was still an acceptable move to have this airco installed. Okay, just in keeping with time, let's look now at what's happening with the total house, right? Because it's not only, it's 2 bedrooms, child bedroom, master bedroom, the living room project, oh no. What is the energy company telling me? The energy company telling me that, and by the way, the house was built 2016, so here you see the data as of 2018. This was the house before we had the living room air conditioning and after the living room was installed, because you see it has an impact. But it was using about 500 kilowatt hours per month. I'm not sure if you're familiar with energy units on your bill, but it's relatively low, because in Aruba, the average consumption is 750, and for bigger homes, it's over 1,000. And even after living room airco was installed, the average was still under the 700 kilowatt hours. Meaning that the energy bill was still, this is the tariffs before recent increases due to the oil prices now. We're still paying about 200 guilders, let's say $100 US dollars per month, which is, I believe, not a lot for a house like this. About 30 kilowatt hours per square meter, because the house is like 280 square meters. So the total consumption, just to speed up, was about 100 to 125 US dollars per month. Now the savings, that depends on what's your reference, but people with similar houses like this pay much more, so I would say the savings at least 100 or 200 US dollars per month. And let's remember that figure, right? Because we're gonna add savings. Okay, so let's say from here we're getting $150 per month in savings. That's on the energy side, after energy efficiency measures. But the Paris Agreement, you know, in Egypt, they're talking about net zero 2050, those things, you know. We want to push up the ambition. We want to push for carbon neutral. So after having reduced all of the energy use, started looking into how can I produce my own energy to fulfill the energy that I'm still needing, right? So I invested in the solar system and came in 2 phases, total 8.5 kilowatts. It's below the regulatory limit of 10 kilowatts in order to produce my own energy. And let me see. After we installed this, we had to get the system up and running, right? Because it had some small issues with it. But then in May 2021, after having it fully installed, We got to this point that the solar production became higher than the consumption of the house. So we're now totally energy neutral. All right. So that means that we're now producing more energy than needed, and that's one of the goals, towards becoming net zero, right? And that leads me to the fundamental question: why would you wait 30 years to do something that you can do today? I'm not going to wait 30 years. That's one of my key points. I'm not going to wait 30 years because we can do it today. As long as you follow the right steps and you make the right decisions. And that's, of course, something for everyone to think about. What can you do? What can we all do to contribute? Then, as you saw, there was a surplus in the energy, right? So, having this extra energy, actually the buyback rate in Aruba is quite favorable. This 85% of the, it's one of the most favorable in Aruba. So I'm getting now money back from the energy company, right? But still thinking on the Paris Agreement and carbon neutral, net zero. By the way, carbon neutral is from the Kyoto Protocol, net zero is from the Paris Agreement. But we're thinking about the cars, right? The fuel. So the next step was to get into electric vehicles. I have the Nissan, the Leaf, and some very wealthy individual gave me a very old electric car for free, an Ion, the Mitsubishi Mief. And now we're charging these cars on the surplus energy. Meaning that we're reducing also the transport emissions, right? In order to reduce the transportation. Okay, and you see the proof here, the net metering, because at the end of the graph, we're not paying anything anymore, but only getting the money back with all of this and having also eliminated now the transport emissions. Fuel savings estimated $250 per month, together with the energy savings, $150. We're now already at $400 per month in savings. And that basically closes the energy part of it. And just to wrap it up, just to show some snapshots, because Mr. Emmanuel also spoke about other areas, waste, water, those things, right? You can do more. You can do a water pressure regulator to save water. You can do garden irrigation with water reuse instead of using water from the water company. You can produce your own food and crops, that's the pumpkin. And the composting also. So the total savings in food are like $200 a month. In water, even excluding the irrigation, also $25. So in total, I think by now I'm saving more than $500 per month in terms of living more affordable. And ladies and gentlemen, that is really my main message. What we want to do, we want to live zero emission, we want to live at a lower cost, and we want to live with more comfort, because let's not forget comfort, which is the main human driver. Thank you very much. Let's not forget John Ferrer, the scientist who rang the global warming alarm, because he inspired all of this for us. Thank you.